Adana stared at the letter on her table until the sky turned indigo. She hadn't touched it again, but its words echoed in her head. Let me explain, not as the man with money, but the man who fell in love. Part of her wanted to tear it to pieces. Another part, quieter but persistent, wanted to hear him out. Wanted to believe that love, when stripped of masks and pride, could still mean something. That night, she didn't sleep much. Ken slept soundly in the next room, unaware of the storm twisting inside his sister. The next day, a knock at the door interrupted her morning tea. She opened it to find no one, just a slim black envelope on the mat. Inside was a handwritten note, this time with unmistakable handwriting. If I could go back to the day we met, I'd tell you everything. But then, you wouldn't have seen the man behind the wealth. And I wouldn't have had the joy of being loved for who I truly am. Please, just one conversation. No lies. No pressure. Meet me at Ysef Park. 4 p.m. Chika. Adana stared at the note for a long time. Then, quietly, she slipped it into her pocket. Ysef Park, 4:03 p.m. The park was quiet, as if Lagos had taken a rare, collective breath. Children's laughter drifted from a playground nearby. The scent of roasted corn and dust danced in the air. Chika stood beneath a jacaranda tree, hands tucked into his pockets, face taut with anxiety. When he saw Adana approach, his breath caught. She was in a simple brown dress, sandals worn but clean, hair tied in a neat bun. Graceful. Grounded. Still the same girl who had once scrubbed floors with dignity. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," he replied, almost in disbelief. For a moment, they stood in silence, two hearts weathered by pride, fear, and longing. "I came," she said, almost surprised at herself. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't." Chika nodded, nervous. "You have every right to hate me." "I don't hate you, Chika," she said. "I just don't know who you are." He exhaled. "Then let me start from the beginning." And he did. He told her everything, how his mother had died when he was young, how his father's wealth had always felt more like a burden than a blessing. How he had taken time away from the CEO spotlight to live a simpler life, to learn how his company functioned from the inside out. And how, in that quiet role of intern, he had met her, and nothing had been the same since. Adana listened in silence. Her expression unreadable. Her eyes piercing through every word. "And when I saw how you treated people, the cleaner, your brother, even my arrogant friend at the foundation event, I knew. I was done pretending," he said. "But by then, I was already too deep in the lie." Silence followed. Then finally, she asked, "So why now? Why the scholarship, the house, the gifts?" "Because I had to make things right. Not to buy your love, but to prove I never wanted to take advantage of it." Adana looked away. "You have no idea what your lie cost me," she said. "I was humiliated. Fired. People think I tricked my way into everything. Even now, I'm afraid this is all just pity dressed up as generosity." "It's not pity," he said gently. "It's remorse. It's hope. It's love." Her eyes met his, filled with doubt, but also something softer. Something wounded but alive. "I don't trust easily," she said. "I'll earn it," he whispered. "Every day, if you'll let me." They sat on the park bench until the sun began to set, painting the sky in oranges and purples. They didn't talk much more. Some wounds don't need words, just presence. When it was time to go, Chika offered to walk her home. She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no either. So they walked, silently, side by side. No promises. Just a small, uncertain step toward something that might still be saved. The days that followed were a delicate dance. Adana and Chika spoke more now, carefully, hesitantly. They met in quiet corners of the city, an old bookstore in Sorulir, a quiet cafe in Lekki, a rooftop overlooking the lagoon. Always in public, always with space between them. Trust wasn't built in a day, but it was beginning to form, like a bridge held together by fragile threads of honesty. Chika never pressured her. He didn't send extravagant gifts or pull billionaire stunts. Instead, he listened. He showed up. He helped Ken with his math homework, cooked jollof rice, badly, and even cleaned her apartment once, wearing a faded Arsenal jersey and a sheepish grin. Adana was surprised by how natural it all began to feel. But the past was not done with them. Meanwhile, at Johnson & Cole headquarters. Inside a sleek office with tinted windows, Sandra Oluwaseun, the company's senior VP of operations, fumed as she studied the reports on her desk. She had always suspected Chika was up to something during his so-called intern phase. But now, with whispers of him frequenting Surulere, of large scholarship donations with no board approval, and of private housing purchases under an alias, she was convinced. And she didn't like what she was seeing. Sandra had spent 15 years clawing her way up the ladder in a company dominated by old money. Her loyalty to the Johnson family had been transactional at best, but she always expected her loyalty to be rewarded. Instead, Chika had started reassigning major portfolios without consulting her. Worse, he was risking the company's reputation over a girl from the slums. She's going to ruin everything, Sandra muttered. She pulled up a file on her laptop. The private investigator she had hired had sent fresh photos, Adana leaving her new apartment, Chika following discreetly behind. Another showed them laughing near Ysef Park. Poor girl, my foot, Sandra sneered. She knows exactly what she's doing. And just like that, her mind clicked into place. She wouldn't confront Chika. She would expose the girl. Discredit her. Destroy her credibility so thoroughly that even he would question his judgment. All she needed was the right scandal. Back in Surulere, Adana was beginning to feel like herself again. She had enrolled in a weekend law prep program funded by the Eco Initiative and had already impressed her professors with her analytical thinking and calm leadership. Ken had started at a private school nearby and was flourishing. He had even made friends and joined the school choir. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt possible. Then came the interview request. A well-known blog, Lagos Talks, emailed her out of the blue. They had heard about her acceptance into the Eco Initiative and wanted to feature her as an inspirational voice for young women. At first, Adana hesitated. But after speaking to her mentor, she agreed, on one condition: her past as a housemaid would not be the focus. She wanted the interview to be about what she had become, not what she had escaped. The interviewer, a young woman named Tola, was kind and professional. The conversation went well, until the last question. So, Adana, there's been chatter online. People say your rise wasn't organic. That you used certain connections to get here. What would you say to that? Adana's face froze. I worked for everything I have, she said quietly. And if people don't believe that, it says more about them than it does about me. Tola nodded, but the glint in her eyes had changed. Right. Last question. Are you romantically involved with the CEO of Johnson & Cole? Adana stood up. The interview ended right there. 2 days later, the story exploded. From mop to mansion, the maid who seduced a billionaire. Exclusive, how Adana Nwosu slept her way into Lagos elite circles. Johnson & Cole CEO scandal, company stuck dips amid allegations. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Bloggers hounded her doorstep. Strangers sent hateful messages. Her scholarship was suddenly under review, and Ken was bullied at school. Worse, her relationship with Chika was now public, and painted as a manipulative, gold-digging scheme. Adana locked herself in her apartment, overwhelmed. I should have never said yes to that interview, she whispered to herself. Outside, the city jeered. Inside, her world cracked. At Johnson & Cole, the board called an emergency meeting. Chika walked in, calm but with steel in his voice. I know who leaked the story, he said. Sandra, one board member guessed. She's had it out for me for months, Chika said. But I'm not here to defend myself. He looked around the room. I'm here to tell you this company isn't going to run on fear anymore. We built this business to stand for integrity. And I'll be damned if we sacrifice a good woman for the sake of press optics. There was silence. Sandra glared, but said nothing. Chika stood tall. You can vote to remove me if you want. But I will not apologize for loving someone decent. Someone strong. Someone better than all of us in this room combined. That night, Adana heard a knock at her door. It was Chika. But this time, he didn't come with flowers. Or apologies. He came with a laptop. Come, he said. You need to see this. He played a recording, a leaked boardroom audio, captured by one of the more sympathetic board members. In it, Sandra admitted to hiring a private investigator. She called Adana a tactical threat to company structure and even discussed planting dirt on her for public humiliation. Adana stared at the screen in disbelief. She tried to destroy me. Chika nodded. But she underestimated the one thing she can't fake, your resilience. Adana had always believed that silence was a shield. It had protected her in her step-parents' home, helped her survive years of humiliation, and given her the strength to quietly rebuild her life. But now, silence was no longer enough. Sandra had crossed a line. And Adana was done letting others write her story. The counterattack begins. By morning, her decision was made. She met with a media lawyer recommended by Chika's close friend, an older woman named Auntie Temi who had once defended whistleblowers during Nigeria's most corrupt pharmaceutical scandal. Temi read through the defamatory blog posts with icy precision. "This is slander," she said simply. "And it's actionable. We'll start with a cease and desist letter. But we'll also file a lawsuit against both Lagos Talks and Sandra Oluwaseun for malicious intent." Adana was nervous. She had never been inside a courtroom except as a cleaner or a student. Now, she would walk in as the plaintiff. Temi smiled at her. "You're not just defending your name. You're defending every girl who's ever been shamed for rising too far, too fast." Adana swallowed hard, and nodded. Public sentiment shifts. The boardroom audio leak hit the internet 2 days later. It spread like wildfire. Major news outlets picked it up. Hashtags like #Adana deserves better and #Sandra step down trended across Nigerian Twitter. Public opinion turned sharply. Sandra was now the manipulator, the social climber, the villain. And Adana, the so-called maid turned mirage, was being seen in a new light. Human. Brave. Real. Sandra tried to deny the recording at first. Claimed it was edited. That the private investigator was never instructed to target Adana specifically. But the damage was done. Within a week, Johnson & Cole's board held a vote. Sandra was asked to resign for the good of the company. She left without fanfare, but not before sending Adana a cold, venomous email. "You may have won the public. But you'll never belong in our world." Adana read it once, then deleted it. She didn't need to belong in their world. She was building her own. Love without pretense. For the first time, their relationship breathed in the open. No more hiding. No more secrets. Chika and Adana began showing up together at public events, not flaunting, just existing. And the city watched with quiet awe as the billionaire and the poor girl didn't just survive scandal, they thrived after it. But it wasn't perfect. Adana still faced whispers when she walked into certain rooms. Some people smiled to her face and sneered behind her back. Others offered fake compliments and fake support. But her spine stayed straight. Her steps stayed forward. Because now, she had purpose. She had founded a mentorship program for girls from disadvantaged backgrounds called Rise and Red. In just 3 months, it was already helping 40 young women prepare for law school, tech boot camps, and university admissions. One day, during a Rise and Red event, Ken stood beside her as she gave a speech. He beamed up at her proudly. "She's my sister," he told a curious journalist. "And she's the strongest person I know." Weeks later, Chika invited her to dinner, not at some fancy hotel, but at the small jollof shack where they used to eat together during his intern days. After the meal, under the glow of an old street lamp, he handed her a small, unmarked envelope. Inside was a land deed. "To build something of your own," he said. "Maybe a school. Or a legal center. Or nothing at all. You don't owe me anything. But I owe you everything." Adana looked at the paper, then back at him. "You still think money can fix everything?" she asked, amused. "No," he said softly. "But love can." Then he knelt. Not with a diamond. With a notebook. Inside were handwritten pages, stories of her, of them, of what they had built together. It wasn't a proposal. It was a promise. Adana took the notebook in trembling hands. And slowly, silently, she nodded. The announcement hit the society pages like a thunderclap. Chika Johnson, Billionaire CEO, engaged to former housemaid turned legal advocate. For every heartfelt congratulations that poured in, there were sneers, insults, and cynical blog posts. Some called it a PR stunt. Others said she had bewitched him. But neither Adana nor Chika responded. Their silence wasn't surrender, it was strength. The engagement was modest. No glitzy magazine photo shoot. No platinum ring broadcast on Instagram. Just a quiet garden ceremony planned for 30 people, family, close friends, and the girls from Adana's Rise and Read initiative. But Lagos wasn't going to let them marry in peace. 2 weeks before the wedding, a courier delivered an unmarked envelope to Adana's apartment. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Call off the wedding, or prepare to lose everything. You don't belong in his world. Adana froze. The paper wasn't signed. But there was a photo attached, one from her early days as a maid, looking disheveled and broken, cleaning someone's vomit off a marble floor. The message was clear: they would shame her if she dared step into the spotlight again. She showed the letter to Chika that evening. He stared at it for a long time, silent. Then he picked up his phone. "I'm increasing your security detail," he said firmly. "And I'll have my team track the origin of this threat." Adana shook her head. "I don't want this to become a war." Chika met her gaze. "It already is." A week before the ceremony, her wedding planner suddenly quit, citing unexpected family issues. Then the venue reported a mysterious double booking, forcing them to relocate. Days later, one of her former neighbors in Surulere gave an exclusive interview claiming that Adana used to steal from the families she worked for. "She used to take food from our kitchen and pretend it was for her brother," the woman lied, grinning at the camera. But really, she was just greedy. The smear campaign was brutal. And targeted. But Adana didn't hide this time. She held a press conference. Standing with her head high, she looked directly into the camera and said, "I am not ashamed of where I come from. I cleaned floors. I scrubbed toilets. I begged. And I survived. If that makes me unworthy of love, then maybe we need to rethink who we're calling worthy in the first place." The applause was thunderous. The wedding day. It rained that morning, not a downpour, but a soft, cleansing drizzle. Adana stood by the mirror in a flowing ivory dress, simple and graceful. Keen buttoned his small tuxedo, beaming with excitement. "Are you nervous?" he asked. She smiled. "Only about not tripping." Outside, the new venue, a quiet botanical garden owned by a friend of Chika's, was already filling with guests. Dignitaries. Entrepreneurs. A few celebrities. But also women from Makako, young lawyers from her scholarship fund, and girls from the slums she once walked through barefoot. As the ceremony began, the rain stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds. Chika stood under a white arch, dressed in a deep blue agbada, his eyes locked on hers as she walked down the aisle. Just as the officiant raised his hand to begin, a commotion stirred in the back row. A tall man in a dark suit stepped forward, holding up a sheaf of papers. "This wedding cannot go on," he shouted. Security moved quickly. Guests gasped. But Chika raised a hand. "Let him speak." The man stepped forward. "My name is Barrister Olumide Faykanal, and I represent the Johnson Family Trust. There are inheritance clauses in the family estate. If Mr. Chika marries someone who does not pass board approval, he forfeits his position, and all shares in Johnson & Co." Whispers rippled. Chika didn't flinch. "And?" he asked. "You'll lose everything," Faykanal said. "The board will replace you by Monday." Chika turned to Adana. She looked up at him with clear, calm eyes. "You don't have to do this. I'll walk away." "No," he said. "You're the only thing I won't walk away from." He turned back to Faykanal. "Then I guess I'll start from scratch," he said. Just like she did. The crowd erupted in applause. And the wedding went on. Under the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the garden trees, Adana and Chika exchanged vows not written by stylists or publicists, but by themselves. "I don't promise a perfect life," she said, her voice trembling, "but I promise a real one. With truth. With purpose. I don't promise I'll always know what to do," Chika said, "but I promise I'll never stop choosing you." Tears shimmered in more than a few eyes. When they kissed, it wasn't just a seal of love. It was a declaration. That no matter what the world threw at them, they would rise. Together. 3 years later, the world knew her name. Not as the maid who married a billionaire. Not as the poor girl who got lucky. But as Adana Chukwudi Johnson, founder of the Rise and Rebuild Foundation, human rights advocate, best-selling author, and one of Africa's most respected emerging voices for equity and social transformation. She never became the CEO of Johnson & Co. Chika had, in fact, stepped down the Monday after their wedding. True to Faye Colonel's threat, the board stripped him of his title, but not before he liquidated his personal holdings, redirecting millions into a trust managed not by banks, but by community builders. Adana used her portion not to buy a mansion or start a fashion line, but to fund the Reclaim Center, a sprawling complex in the outskirts of Lagos that offered free legal aid, mentorship programs, a literacy school, and a startup hub for female entrepreneurs. It became a refuge, a movement, a mirror to every girl who thought survival meant staying silent. And the world noticed. CNN named her one of Africa's top 10 changemakers under 35. She gave a TED Talk titled The Cost of Shame and the Price of Rising, which went viral across the continent. But Adana remained grounded. She still took her little brother Ken to school herself. Still cooked jollof rice on Sundays. Still stopped by her old neighborhood, not with pity, but with purpose. Because for her, power wasn't about prestige. It was about protection. One afternoon, while preparing for a public policy summit in Nairobi, Adana received a message from an unknown number. "I know I hurt you. I want to talk. No cameras. No drama." Sandra. Chika was skeptical. So was Temi, her lawyer. But Adana said yes. They met in a quiet cafe in Victoria Island. Sandra looked thinner, wearier. She was no longer with Johnson & Co. Word had it she'd tried launching a new consulting firm, but investors had been hesitant. "You look powerful," Sandra said, eyes darting. "I didn't think you'd actually last." Adana sipped her tea. "That's the difference between climbing a ladder and building your own staircase." Sandra tried to smile. "You won. I lost. But maybe we don't have to be enemies anymore." Adana leaned forward, calm. "We were never enemies, Sandra. You were just afraid of someone like me rising. That fear was your cage. I hope you find your way out." Then she stood, leaving a small card on the table. "The Reclaim Center, volunteer registration," and walked out. At the second anniversary of the Reclaim Center, Adana stood before a crowd of over 1,000 young women and girls. She looked at their faces, bright, hopeful, some still bruised by life but unbroken. She told them the full story. No edits. No gloss. From mopping floors to being mocked in tabloids. From being a pawn in a billionaire's scandal to becoming a woman who needed no one's permission to lead. And when she said, "You don't have to wait for someone to choose you, choose yourself," they rose to their feet. Cheering. Crying. Believing. That night, after the celebration, she and Chika sat on their porch watching the stars. He had started his own sustainable investment firm, focused on clean energy and rural innovation. They were equals now, not in title, but in purpose. Chika rested his head on her shoulder. "Do you ever miss the quiet life?" Adana laughed. "There was never anything quiet about my life." They sat there in silence, the kind that only comes after surviving the noise. Then Ken ran out onto the porch, holding a school project, a poster titled "My Sister the Warrior." Chika smiled. "That's the truest title you've ever had." Adana looked up at the stars. And whispered, "Not the last one." Behind every powerful woman is not a lucky break, or a wealthy man, but a moment when she decides, "I deserve more. And I'm going to build it." Adana did more than survive her story. She rewrote it. And made space for 1,000 others to do the same.